speaker is Dipu. Dipu is councillor for Elsick Ward in Newcastle and is representing Newcastle United tonight. He is a long-standing and tireless anti-racism campaigner in Newcastle. Please welcome Dipu.
Thank you very much. It's great being amongst so many young people just like me. This is a bit when you laugh. Anyways. And I mean, the thing about being one of the last speakers is everyone's already said what you were going to say. So that's my excuse, and I've got 5 minutes. Anyhow, we were just watching a video, as everyone just watched 10-15 minutes back. And we've seen historic videos. And I've been to Auschwitz and seen how millions of Jews and other people from other communities were persecuted, killed, exterminated during the Second World War. Well, this all started with the demonization of a community. The Jews, the Roma community, the gay community, disabled communities were first demonized. And the extermination came after. But what did we say? What do we say now? Never again. We've seen in the 90s, in Srebrenica, I don't think many of you were born or were very young, but it started, the genocide in Srebrenica, and the whole of Bosnia, started with demonization. But what do we say? Never again. We see clips of Dr. Martin Luther King coming to our great city, and a city which got a history of standing up and fighting against racism and fascism. And we say, oh, we've learned from that. Newcastle City Council was one of the first councils which gave the likes of Nelson Mandela the freedom of the city, when the whole world still branded, and particularly the Tory government at the time, branded Nelson Mandela as a terrorist. We as a city give them the freedom of the city. And we said that we are going to stand up for the rights of minority communities and any community which is facing persecution. But what do we see today? Today, in our city, in our society, we see the rise of the far right and the rise of bigotry, not only by the far right, by governments, not only in the UK, but throughout Europe. I did a speech in 2010 in Sweden, and in that event, it was the European Coalition Cities Against Racism, a long title. And in that conference, one of the task groups came out, and everyone agreed that we need to start fearing and understanding the mobilization of the far right and how significant impact it's going to have throughout Europe. And for the last 8-9 years, I've been saying the same thing to our council and everywhere I do a speech, that we need to watch out and we need to wake up to the rise of the far right. The reason for this is, it's not the far right we see in the 70s and 80s, similar attitude, but the mobilization of the far right. And how does that happen? Through social media, the internet. So the far right are a lot more powerful than they were previously, and we cannot ignore this threat anymore. We talk about the DPLA, the EDL, the Pegida, but our biggest enemies at this moment, and I'm not trying to put us against them, it's our government. Although I'm a Labour councillor, and honestly I'm not doing this for political reasons, but as mentioned before by Anna, about Boris's stance on women wearing the burqa, the Grenfell Tower disaster, this was all racism. This was all racism, but do you know where this comes from? It comes from colonization. And Jeremy Corbyn, just this week or last week, he mentioned, and I've said this all along, if we don't start teaching our children about the history of our country, about the colonization, how this country colonized millions of people, destroyed communities, destroyed countries, we still need to fight, because unless we start teaching our children about colonization, we're not going to get anywhere. Because it's still embedded in us. The mindset of Donald Trump or Boris, it's all the colonization mindset. It's about you and us. You're inferior, we are superior. You see the referendum and the Brexit, most of the campaign was based on racism. You might agree with Brexit or not, but the campaign by the Tories and other far-right groups like UKIP, it was all based on a colonized mindset, you versus us, and they were demonizing the minority communities, the immigrants, them. So we have to understand the mindset, the colonization mindset, and we need to stand up to that. Yes, we got the DVLA, yes, we got the EDL, yes, we got Pegida, yes, we got other far-right groups who are going to come every week. But unless we tackle colonization, if we don't break that trend within the governments or the elite, racism will continue. And I'd like to finish with a few things. I think it's important. I was in Bosnia just a few weeks back. So the police came to my house and said, Dipu, you've got significant death threats against your life, and so you need to watch out. I didn't take it seriously. Went to Bosnia and came back from Bosnia, and there was a camera outside my house. I was a bit concerned, called the authorities, and the authorities said, look, we put it on for your safety. I was really uncomfortable with it, having a camera in front of my house, because sometimes you think, nothing's going to happen to you. But this is what my mum said. And she said, Dipu, all this time, we've never said a word, but you've got 6 sisters in the house, and we do need a bit of protection. And this just shows that sometimes we might be heroic, thinking, nothing's going to happen to us, but it's the women who suffer a lot. And this is, which gets to my point about women. Smile's sitting at the back. We went to Bosnia, and in Srebrenica, more than 9,000 men were massacred. Who suffered the most? Although the men were destroyed, exterminated, sorry for the word, but it was the women who still suffer till today. And the rise of the far right, the rise of fascism we see in our country at this moment in time, the biggest victims of the rise of the far right are women, and particularly Muslim women. So I say this before I finish. Some of these are already converted. You know about racism. Some of these are activists. Some of you are here to learn and start combating racism and fascism. And I say this, we need you on our side, because racism is not going anywhere for a long time unless we break the cycle. And we need you to be on our side and go home today. You're not here just for a speech, but become active. Whatever small, whatever big, we need to get active and stand up for the rights of all. Thank you very much.